The day of the funeral arrived with a sky that couldn't decide between rain and sunshine. Eliza stood by the window of her childhood home, watching clouds drift across patches of blue. It felt wrong that the world could still look beautiful on a day like this. She smoothed down the black dress she'd bought 2 days ago, tags still attached until this morning. Her mother would have hated it, too plain, too dark. Life is for color, Vivian used to say, before the brightness in her own life had dimmed. The old Polaroid camera sat on the dresser where Eliza had placed it last night. It was her mother's prized possession, a vintage SX-70 that had documented their family history for decades. The camera's tan leather case was worn at the corners and the chrome edges had lost their shine, but the lens remained clear as ever. Vivian had been inseparable from it until these last few months. "The car is here," called a voice from downstairs. It was her Aunt Beth, who had flown in from Arizona yesterday, the only person who'd stayed in touch with Vivian during those strange final years. Eliza picked up the camera, hesitated, then slipped it into her purse. It seemed right somehow that it should be there today. The funeral home was only a 15-minute drive from the house, but Eliza felt every second stretch like pulled taffy. The buildings and trees outside blurred together as she tried to make sense of the last week. Her mother, stubborn, mysterious Vivian Mitchell, gone at 68. The doctor had called it heart failure, but Eliza wondered if loneliness had played its part. "She asked about you," Aunt Beth said, breaking the silence. Even at the end, Eliza nodded, throat tight. She wanted to ask what else her mother had said, what secrets she might have shared in those final days but couldn't form the words. Their last conversation 3 months ago had ended with Vivian hanging up mid-sentence, refusing to explain why she wouldn't leave the house anymore, why she'd covered all the mirrors, why she'd stopped answering most calls. The funeral home was already half filled when they arrived. Eliza was surprised to see so many people, former colleagues from the university where Vivian had taught literature, neighbors, even students from years past. Her mother had been loved once before she'd withdrawn from the world. The casket stood at the front of the room, surrounded by arrangements of wildflowers. Vivian's explicit request, no roses or lilies. Eliza approached slowly, Aunt Beth's hand on her elbow for support. She hadn't wanted an open casket, but had been overruled by her mother's will, which specified everything down to the clothes she should be buried in. A deep purple dress with silver embroidery that Eliza remembered from happier times. Looking down at her mother's face, Eliza searched for signs of the woman who had once hiked mountains, who had laughed so loudly in movie theaters that strangers would turn to look, who had taught Eliza to swim by simply tossing her into the deep end of the lake. Instead, she saw only a carefully made-up stranger, peaceful in a way Vivian had never been in life. "She looks like she's sleeping," whispered an older woman who had appeared beside Eliza. Eliza wanted to disagree. Her mother had been a restless sleeper, always tossing and turning, sometimes waking with a gasp from dreams she refused to discuss. This stillness was nothing like her mother at all. The service began, and Eliza took her seat in the front row. People spoke about Vivian, her brilliance as a teacher, her passion for photography, her habit of starting conversations with strangers. Eliza listened, wondering if they were talking about the same person who had become a recluse these past 2 years, who had filled her home with strange books about the supernatural, who had called Eliza at 3 a.m. 6 months ago to ask if she'd been seeing them too. When it was her turn to speak, Eliza stood on shaky legs. She had prepared notes but found herself abandoning them. Instead, she told the story of how her mother had taught her to use the Polaroid when she was just 7 years old. "She told me the camera doesn't just take pictures," Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It captures moments that would otherwise be lost forever." It was magic to me then. I think in some ways it was magic to her too, right until the end. After the service, people formed a line to view the casket one last time before it would be closed for burial. Eliza stood nearby, accepting hugs and handshakes from people whose names she could barely remember. Her purse felt heavy against her side, the camera a solid weight pulling at her shoulder. When the line thinned, Eliza approached the casket again. This would be her last chance to say goodbye before the drive to the cemetery. She reached into her purse and pulled out the Polaroid, along with a photo she'd found while going through her mother's things yesterday. A faded picture of teenage Eliza and Vivian standing on a beach, arms around each other, squinting into the sun. "I found this in your desk drawer," Eliza whispered. Though she knew her mother couldn't hear, "You kept it all these years." A lump formed in her throat as she remembered that day, a rare perfect afternoon before her father left, before college pulled her away, before her mother began her slow retreat from the world. They had been happy then, hadn't they? Eliza wanted to place the photo in the casket, a small piece of joy to accompany her mother. She leaned forward, carefully reaching past the satin lining. Her hands were shaking. The funeral director had stepped away, speaking in hushed tones with Aunt Beth about the procession to the cemetery. As Eliza tucked the photograph beside her mother's hand, her purse slipped forward on her shoulder. She tried to adjust it, but everything seemed to happen at once. The strap caught on her bracelet, the purse tipped, and the camera tumbled out. Before she could react, it landed with a soft thud next to her mother's body, partially hidden by the casket's satin folds. "Oh no," Eliza gasped, reaching for it, but at that moment the funeral director returned. "It's time, Ms. Mitchell," he said gently. "We need to close the casket now." "Wait," Eliza started to say, but her voice caught as more people gathered around, ready for the procession. Aunt Beth was beckoning her. The pallbearers were moving into position, and the funeral director's assistant was already reaching for the casket lid. Confusion and grief clouded her thoughts. Had the camera fallen completely inside, or was it just her imagination? Should she cause a scene now, delay everything to check? The thought of explaining, of reaching into her mother's casket in front of everyone, it was too much. "Eliza? Are you coming?" Aunt Beth called. The moment passed. The casket was closed, the latches secured with quiet clicks that seemed to echo in Eliza's ears. She told herself she must have been mistaken. The camera couldn't have fallen in, she would have noticed. Someone would have seen it. Yet as she followed the casket out to the hearse, a strange feeling settled over her, a cold weight pressing against her chest. The same feeling she'd had as a child when she'd accidentally locked herself in her mother's closet, surrounded by darkness and the smell of Vivian's perfume, certain that something else was in there with her. The cemetery was on a hill overlooking the town, old trees casting dappled shadows across rows of headstones. As they lowered her mother's casket into the ground, Eliza searched her purse again, hoping to find the camera tucked into some forgotten pocket. It wasn't there. She stayed silent through the final prayers, through the handfuls of dirt dropped onto polished wood, through the murmured condolences and invitations to the reception. She had no desire to attend. All she could think about was the camera, trapped in the darkness with her mother. That night, alone in her mother's house, Eliza sat on the edge of the bed in what had once been her childhood room. The walls were still the same pale yellow, though the posters and photos had long been replaced by her mother's strange collection of framed astronomical charts and old maps. She couldn't stop thinking about the camera. It seemed wrong somehow to have lost it like that, the last piece of her mother's true self buried in the ground. And yet another part of her felt an odd relief. That camera had been with Vivian through her decline, had somehow become entangled with her mother's growing paranoia and obsession with things unseen. Eliza lay back on the bed, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Tomorrow she would begin the process of sorting through the house, of deciding what to keep and what to let go. Tomorrow she would face the questions that had been building for years. What had happened to her vibrant, fearless mother? What had she been so afraid of in the end? As sleep began to pull her under, Eliza could have sworn she heard the distinctive whir of a Polaroid camera ejecting a photo, somewhere in the silent house. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Eliza woke to sunlight streaming through thin curtains. For a moment she forgot where she was, reaching for her phone on a nightstand that wasn't there. Then reality settled back in. Her mother's house, the funeral yesterday, the strange dream about the camera. The floor creaked under her feet as she made her way downstairs. The house felt different in daylight, less threatening but somehow more sad. Photos lined the stairway wall, a timeline of their family that stopped abruptly 5 years ago, as if Vivian had decided that moment was when history should end. In the kitchen, Aunt Beth had already made coffee. She sat at the old wooden table, glasses perched on her nose, sorting through a stack of mail. "You've got visitors," she said, not looking up. "Funeral home people. They're in the living room." Eliza's heart jumped. Had they found the camera? She hurried through the dining room, still in her sleep clothes, and found a young man in a dark suit standing awkwardly by the fireplace. "Ms. Mitchell? I'm Drew from Pinecrest Funeral Home," he said, extending his hand. "Sorry to bother you so early, but Mr. Goodwin asked me to drop these things off right away." He gestured to a small cardboard box on the coffee table. "These were with your mother during the service. Standard procedure is to remove personal items before burial, but somehow these got overlooked until the final preparations." Eliza thanked him, barely hearing her own words as she signed the form he held out. After he left, she sat on the couch and pulled the box toward her. Inside were her mother's reading glasses, a small silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother, and, her breath caught, the Polaroid camera. Its familiar weight in her hands brought both relief and confusion. Someone at the funeral home must have found it and removed it from the casket. Though she couldn't remember seeing anyone do so, she turned it over, checking for damage. The camera looked exactly the same, yet somehow different, as if it had aged overnight. Her finger brushed against the film counter. It showed 3 exposures left. That was odd. Eliza was sure the camera had been empty. Her mother had stopped taking photos months ago, claiming the camera wasn't working right anymore. Curious, she pressed the shutter button. The camera whirred to life, a sound that brought back childhood memories of summer vacations and birthday parties. A photo slid out from the front slot. Eliza set it on the table, waiting for the image to develop. Her mother had always said that watching a Polaroid develop was like watching a memory being born. As the blank square slowly gained color and definition, Eliza felt a chill spread through her chest. The photo showed the inside of what could only be the casket, the satin lining visible, part of her mother's purple dress in frame, and something else, a dark shape hovering near the edge of the image. Not a person, not exactly, but something with form and substance that shouldn't have been there. "That's impossible," she whispered, picking up the photo for a closer look. The camera couldn't have taken pictures while inside the casket. And yet, she thought back to her dream last night, the sound of the camera whirring in the empty house. Had it been a dream at all? Aunt Beth walked in, coffee mug in hand. What did they want? Eliza quickly slipped the photo into her pocket. "Just returning some of Mom's things they found after the service." Beth nodded toward the camera. "That old thing still works? Your mother was obsessed with it these past few years. Wouldn't let anyone else touch it. Did she say why?" Eliza asked, trying to sound casual. Beth shrugged. "You know how she got. Secretive. Kept saying she was documenting something important." She took a sip of coffee. "The way she talked sometimes, you'd think she was hunting ghosts." The words hung in the air between them. Eliza thought of the strange shape in the photo, resisting the urge to pull it out again. "I need to start sorting through her things," Eliza said, changing the subject. "The lawyer said we have until the end of the month before we need to decide about selling the house." After breakfast, Eliza began the painful process of going through her mother's belongings. She started in the study, where floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held volumes, on every subject imaginable, from classic literature to obscure topics like liminal spaces in photography and visual, documentation of the unseen. She pulled books from shelves, sorted papers, and filled trash bags with things that could be donated or discarded. The camera sat on the desk where she'd placed it earlier. Occasionally, she glanced at it, half expecting it to move on its own. By mid-afternoon, she'd made decent progress on the bookshelves but had barely touched the desk or filing cabinets. Aunt Beth had left for the grocery store, leaving Eliza alone in the quiet house. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Her fingers kept returning to the photo in her pocket. She'd avoided looking at it again, afraid of what she might see or what might have changed. Polaroids were supposed to be frozen moments, unchangeable once developed. But something about this one felt unstable, as if the image was still forming somehow. Finally, she couldn't resist any longer. She pulled out the photo and laid it flat on the desk. The image had changed. The dark shape was closer to the center now, more defined. It almost looked like a figure standing over her mother, though the features were still blurred. "This isn't possible," Eliza said aloud, her voice sounding thin in the empty room. Her eyes fell on the camera again, 2 exposures left according to the counter. Before she could think better of it, she pressed the shutter button again. The mechanical whir seemed louder this time, more labored. Another square of film emerged. As this new photo developed, Eliza found herself holding her breath. This image showed a different angle, as if the camera had been positioned at her mother's side rather than where it had fallen. The same dark figure was there, but now there were others too, shadowy forms gathered around the casket looking in. None of them had distinct faces, just darker patches where features should be. Eliza dropped the photo as if it had burned her fingers. These pictures couldn't have been taken in the casket. Someone must have used the camera afterwards, but who? And why return it like this with these disturbing images? Unless... She thought of her mother's increasingly strange behavior in those final months. The covered mirrors, the refusal to leave the house after dark, the cryptic phone calls about them watching her. Everyone had assumed Vivian was suffering from paranoia, maybe early dementia. Even Eliza had believed that, despite her guilt at the thought. But what if her mother had actually seen something real? What if the camera had somehow captured it? With shaking hands, Eliza picked up the camera again. One exposure left. She hesitated, finger hovering over the button. Part of her wanted to throw the camera away to pretend she'd never seen the photos. But a stronger part, the part that had inherited her mother's stubborn curiosity, needed to know more. She pressed the button. The camera made a different sound this time, a strained, grinding noise before ejecting the final photo. This one developed faster than the others, the image appearing almost immediately. It showed her mother's face in the casket, eyes closed as Eliza remembered. But as she watched, a small dark spot appeared on the photo, growing larger, spreading like ink through water. It bloomed across her mother's face, forming what looked like another face superimposed over Vivian's, mouth open in what could have been a scream or a hungry gasp. Eliza dropped the photo, backing away from the desk. Her heel caught on the edge of the carpet, and she stumbled, catching herself against the bookshelf. Several books tumbled to the floor, one falling open to reveal pages filled with her mother's handwriting. Kneeling to pick it up, Eliza realized it wasn't a published book, but a journal. The open page was dated just 3 months ago. It's getting stronger, her mother had written in shaky script. The camera shows them clearly now. They know I can see them. They know I've been documenting them. Last night, one of them spoke my name. Eliza flipped through more pages, her heart pounding. The entries became increasingly frantic, filled with sketches of the same shadowy figures that had appeared in the photos. Her mother described them watching her, following her from room to room, standing at the foot of her bed at night. The final entry was dated just 1 week before her death. They can't cross over completely without help. They need an anchor, something connecting their world to ours. I've realized too late that the camera isn't just recording them, it's helping them. Every photo creates a stronger connection. I've hidden the remaining film where they can't make me use it. If anyone finds this, especially you, Eliza, destroy the camera. Don't look at the photos. Don't take any more pictures. It's how they get through. Eliza closed the journal, her hands trembling. She looked at the 3 Polaroids spread across the desk, at the camera sitting innocently beside them. According to her mother's counter, there should have been no film left. But there had been 3 exposures, and now there were 3 new photos. Photos that couldn't possibly exist. As the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows across the study floor, Eliza gathered up the photos and the journal. She needed to understand what her mother had discovered, what she had been so afraid of, and most importantly, what might have followed the camera back from her mother's casket. From somewhere upstairs came a sound like footsteps, though Aunt Beth wasn't due back for hours. Eliza froze, listening. The sound came again, a slow, deliberate creak of floorboards, as if something heavy was moving across her mother's bedroom floor. Something that had been waiting for the final photo to be taken. Eliza stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, listening to the creaking floorboards above. Her mind raced through logical explanations. The house settling, a window left open, maybe even a squirrel in the attic. But the footsteps sounded too deliberate, too heavy. "Hello?" she called out, her voice smaller than intended. No response came except another creak, this one from a different part of the upstairs hallway. She clutched her mother's journal tighter against her chest, the 3 Polaroid photos tucked safely between its pages. The sensible thing would be to leave, to call someone. Maybe the police, though what would she tell them? That she had ghost photos from a camera that had spent the night in her mother's casket? Instead, she found herself climbing the stairs, one cautious step at a time. The photos felt warm against her skin. almost vibrating with energy. She needed to understand what her mother had discovered, what had frightened her so badly in those final months. The upstairs hallway was dim, afternoon sunlight fading as clouds gathered outside. 4 doors led off the hallway. Her childhood bedroom where she'd slept last night, a bathroom, a linen closet, and at the end, her mother's room. That door stood slightly ajar, though Eliza was certain it had been closed earlier. She approached slowly, aware of every creak beneath her feet, every shallow breath. When she reached the door, she paused, hand hovering over the wooden surface. Something cold brushed against the back of her neck. Not a touch exactly, more like the memory of one. Eliza pushed the door open. Her mother's room looked untouched since Vivian's death. The bed was still unmade. A book lay open on the nightstand, reading glasses folded neatly beside it. Heavy curtains blocked most of the window light, leaving the room in gray shadows. Nothing seemed disturbed, nothing out of place. Yet the air felt different somehow, heavier, charged like the atmosphere before a lightning storm. Eliza stepped inside, scanning the room for anything unusual. Her eyes landed on her mother's dresser, where dozens of photographs stood in frames of various sizes. Family photos mostly, spanning decades. Eliza as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, her father before he left. Grandparents, aunts, family vacations, but something was wrong with them. Eliza moved closer, picking up a silver-framed photo of herself at graduation. In the picture, she stood smiling in cap and gown, her mother's arm around her shoulders. Except now, a dark smudge obscured her mother's face like someone had pressed a thumbprint of ash into the image. She grabbed another frame, her parents' wedding photo. Another smudge, this time over her father's face. Frame after frame, she found the same thing. Dark marks obliterating faces growing larger in more recent photos. "What is happening?" she whispered. Behind her, the bedroom door slammed shut. Eliza spun around, heart hammering against her ribs. She was alone in the room, but the air had grown colder, dense with an invisible presence. The journal in her hand seemed to pulse with warmth, the only heat in the suddenly freezing room. She opened it with trembling fingers, flipping past the final entry she'd already read, discovering several more pages filled with her mother's increasingly frantic handwriting. "They're in the photos now," one entry read. "All the old ones. They're changing them somehow, removing us bit by bit. It's like they're erasing our existence, making room for themselves." Another entry, dated just 3 days before her mother's death. "I tried to destroy the camera today. Couldn't do it. My hands wouldn't obey me. They wouldn't let me. They need it. They need me. God help me, I think they need my death." Eliza's blood turned to ice. Had her mother known what was coming? Had these, whatever they were, had they somehow caused her death? A soft thud drew her attention to the floor near the bed. One of the photos had fallen from the nightstand. A Polaroid, not in a frame. Eliza bent to pick it up, then gasped. It showed her mother's bedroom, this very room, taken from the doorway where Eliza had been standing just minutes ago. But in the photo, a figure sat on the edge of the bed. Not her mother, but something with only the rough shape of a person, like a shadow given partial substance. And it was looking directly at the camera. The timestamp at the bottom of the Polaroid read today's date, and a time just 15 minutes ago. Eliza backed toward the door, unable to tear her eyes from the impossible photo. Her shoulder blades hit the wooden surface and she fumbled behind her for the doorknob. It was ice cold to the touch and wouldn't turn. "This isn't real," she said aloud, trying to steady her voice. "This can't be real." From the bed came another soft sound, the rustle of sheets being disturbed as if someone had just stood up. But the bed remained empty, the impression in the mattress forming slowly, as if under invisible weight. Eliza pressed her back harder against the door. The journal and photos clutched to her chest like a shield. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. "Don't look at the photos. Don't take any more pictures. It's how they get through." But it was too late. She had looked. She had taken more photos. And now something was here, in the house, in this very room with her. The temperature dropped further, her breath fogging in the air. The light seemed to dim, shadows in the corners of the room deepening, spreading like spilled ink across the floor and walls. With a final desperate twist, the doorknob gave way. Eliza stumbled backward into the hallway, slamming the door shut. She raced down the stairs, grabbing her car keys from the entry table. She needed to get out, to think, to find someone who might understand what was happening. 20 minutes later, Eliza sat in her car in the parking lot of the university where her mother had taught for over 30 years. Rain tapped against the windshield, blurring the red brick buildings beyond. She had driven here on instinct, remembering something her aunt had said that morning. The way she talked, sometimes you'd think she was hunting ghosts. Her mother hadn't been a ghost hunter. She'd been a literature professor, specializing in Gothic fiction and folklore, but Eliza remembered now that Vivian had collaborated with colleagues from other departments, including someone from the parapsychology research group. The university directory led her to a small office in the basement of the science building. The nameplate on the door read, Dr. Helena Ward, Parapsychology Research. Eliza knocked, not really expecting anyone to be there on a Saturday afternoon. To her surprise, the door opened to reveal a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a neat bun. Office hours are Monday through Thursday, the woman began, then stopped, studying Eliza's face. Wait, you're Vivian's daughter, aren't you, Eliza? Eliza nodded, suddenly unsure what to say, how to explain her presence. Dr. Ward's expression softened. I was so sorry to hear about your mother. I wanted to attend the funeral, but I was at a conference in Boston. She hesitated, then added, Please come in. The office was small but meticulously organized. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with volumes on paranormal research, psychology, and quantum physics. Framed degrees hung beside photographs of strange light phenomena and what appeared to be heat-sensing camera images. You look like you've seen a ghost, Dr. Ward said, then grimaced. Sorry. Occupational hazard, inappropriate metaphors. What I mean is you look troubled. I found something, Eliza said, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. After my mother died, her camera, her journal, and photos. Photos that shouldn't exist. She placed the journal on Dr. Ward's desk, along with the 3 Polaroids from the camera and the one she'd found in her mother's room. As Dr. Ward examined them, her professional composure cracked, her eyes widening. She did it, she whispered. She actually did it. Did what? Eliza asked. Dr. Ward looked up, her expression caught between academic excitement and genuine fear. Your mother and I were researching something together. A theory about liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds, and how they might be captured through certain photographic techniques. She picked up one of the Polaroids, the one showing the inside of the casket with shadowy figures looking in. We theorized that moments of transition, birth, death, even the moment a photograph develops from blank to image, create temporary doorways. Your mother modified her camera to capture these doorways, to document what might exist on the other side. She said the camera wasn't just recording them, Eliza said, pointing to a passage in the journal. She said it was helping them somehow. Dr. Ward nodded gravely. That was our concern. If you create a window, something might look back through it. If you create a door... She didn't finish the thought. What are they? Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We don't know exactly. Your mother called them the Watchers, entities that exist alongside our reality but can't fully enter it without help. They need anchors, objects, or people that exist in both worlds. Dr. Ward carefully closed the journal. The camera was just meant to be a viewing device, but your mother believed it had become something more. A key to a lock that should have remained closed. And now? Eliza asked, thinking of the presence in her mother's room. The frozen doorknob, the changed photographs. Now, Dr. Ward said, her eyes troubled. I think when you dropped that camera into your mother's casket, you created the most powerful liminal space possible. A threshold between life and death, locked in with a key designed to open it. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming against the small basement window. The office lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. They're following you, Dr. Ward said quietly, looking at something over Eliza's shoulder. They're here right now. Eliza didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She could feel it. The same cold pressure she'd felt in her mother's room. The sensation of being watched by eyes that existed just beyond the edge of perception. How do I stop it? She asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Dr. Ward reached for a drawer in her desk. Your mother thought she found a way. She left something with me for safekeeping. She pulled out a small wooden box, its surface carved with strange symbols. She said if anything happened to her, I should give this to you. I think she knew somehow that it would come to this. As Eliza reached for the box, the lights went out, plunging the office into darkness. Darkness swallowed Dr. Ward's office. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were their breathing and the rain drumming against the window. Then came a soft click as Dr. Ward switched on a flashlight. Power outages aren't uncommon in this old building, she said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe this was just a coincidence, especially during storms. The beam of light created more shadows than illumination, stretching dark shapes across the walls. Eliza's eyes were drawn to the wooden box on the desk, its carved symbols seeming to shift in the unsteady light. "What's inside?" she asked. Dr. Ward pushed the box toward her. "Your mother wanted you to have it. She said you would know when to use it." The box was heavier than it looked, warm to the touch despite the chill in the room. No visible latch or keyhole, just those strange symbols carved into the dark wood. Eliza ran her fingers over them, feeling subtle indentations that formed a pattern. "Press here," Dr. Ward said, guiding Eliza's thumb to a particular symbol, a spiral surrounded by what looked like rays of light. "And here." She pointed to another symbol on the opposite corner. Eliza pressed both spots simultaneously. A soft click, and the top of the box slid open a fraction of an inch. Inside lay a small leather pouch and a folded piece of paper. Eliza recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. "My dearest Eliza," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone and they're coming for you now. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you. What began as research became something much more dangerous. The camera was modified to see them, but it became a beacon, drawing them to our world. They need anchors, objects, or people to fully cross over. I became their first anchor. You must not become the second." Eliza's hands trembled as she read on. "Inside this pouch are 3 things: a silver needle, a vial of salt mixed with graveyard dirt, and a piece of film from the first photo that captured one of them. These items used properly can close the door I accidentally opened. Dr. Ward knows the ritual. Trust her, but remember they will try to stop you. They will use any means necessary, including deception. They can appear as anyone, even me. Trust only what you know to be true in your heart." The letter ended with a simple "I love you," followed by her mother's signature. Eliza looked up at Dr. Ward, whose face appeared ghostly in the flashlight's glow. "What ritual? What am I supposed to do with these things?" Before Dr. Ward could answer, the flashlight flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, Eliza felt something cold brush against her cheek. Not a touch, but the absence of one, as if someone had removed a small piece of warmth from her skin. Dr. Ward's voice came from across the room, though Eliza hadn't heard her move. "We need to leave now. This place isn't safe anymore." "Why not?" Eliza clutched the box and letter close to her chest. "Because," Dr. Ward replied, her voice strangely flat, "they know what we're planning." A match flared to life, illuminating Dr. Ward's face from below. But something was wrong with her eyes. They reflected the light like an animal's, glowing red in the darkness. Eliza backed toward the door. "You're not Dr. Ward." The thing wearing Dr. Ward's face smiled, revealing teeth too sharp, too numerous. "Smart girl. Just like your mother." She knew too much, saw too much. "And now so do you." Eliza fumbled for the doorknob behind her, never taking her eyes off the figure by the desk. The wooden box felt hot against her skin, almost burning. "You can't stop what's already begun," the creature said, its voice overlapping with itself, as if multiple people were speaking in unison. "The door is open. We're coming through. All of us." The match went out. In the darkness, Eliza heard movement, a rustling, sliding sound like something large dragging itself across the floor. She yanked the door open and bolted into the hallway. The basement corridor was dimly lit by emergency lights, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Eliza ran toward the exit sign, the box clutched tightly under one arm, her footsteps echoing against the tile floor. Behind her came that strange sliding sound, faster now, gaining on her. She burst through the emergency exit into the rain-soaked afternoon. The storm had intensified, heavy clouds turning day into premature dusk. Eliza raced across the parking lot to her car, fumbling with her keys, casting frantic glances over her shoulder. Nothing followed her out of the building. But as she slid into the driver's seat, she caught a glimpse of a face in the science building's window. Dr. Ward's face, but wrong somehow. elongated and pale, watching her with those reflective eyes. Eliza's tires squealed as she pulled out of the parking lot, heading back toward her mother's house. She needed to think, to understand what the letter meant, what ritual her mother had discovered. The leather pouch sat heavy in her pocket, its contents clicking together with each turn of the car. Rain pounded against the windshield, making it difficult to see. The wipers struggled to keep up, creating brief moments of clarity before water obscured her vision again. Through the blur, Eliza thought she saw figures standing along the roadside, dark shapes watching her pass, turning their featureless faces to follow her car. At a stoplight, she pulled out the letter again, scanning it for any clues she might have missed. The ritual, whatever it was, required the items in the pouch and Dr. Ward's knowledge. But the real Dr. Ward was... Eliza didn't want to think about what might have happened to her. The light turned green. As Eliza accelerated, a face appeared in her rearview mirror, not behind her car but in the back seat. Her mother's face, pale and waxy as it had been in the casket. Eliza nearly swerved off the road. When she looked again, the back seat was empty. They can appear as anyone, her mother's letter had warned. Even me. By the time she reached her mother's house, the storm had grown so fierce that trees bent sideways in the wind. Eliza sat in her car for a long moment, watching the dark windows of the house, looking for any sign of movement inside. Aunt Beth's car wasn't in the driveway, still out running errands, probably delayed by the storm. Eliza was alone. And yet she felt with absolute certainty that the house was not empty. She considered driving away, finding a hotel, calling the police, though what would she tell them? That her dead mother's camera had opened a door for shadow creatures? That her mother's colleague might have been replaced by something inhuman? Instead, she gathered her courage and stepped out into the rain. The wooden box tucked under her jacket, she ran to the front door and let herself in. The house was eerily quiet despite the storm raging outside. The power was out here too, leaving the interior in gray shadows. Eliza moved through the entryway toward the kitchen, where she knew her mother kept emergency candles. Each step felt like walking deeper into a trap, but she had nowhere else to go. In the kitchen drawer beside the candles, Eliza found something else. A small leather-bound book she hadn't noticed before. Its cover bore the same strange symbols as the wooden box. When she opened it, she found pages of her mother's handwriting, different from the journal she'd discovered earlier. This wasn't a record of observations, but a set of instructions. The Ritual of Severance, read the title page. Eliza quickly scanned the contents, her pulse quickening. The ritual described was intended to close a doorway between worlds, to sever the connection created by the camera. It required specific conditions. It had to be performed at the threshold where the connection was strongest. Using the items her mother had left in the box, for Eliza, that threshold could only be one place, her mother's grave. The final page contained a warning. The ritual must be completed before the third night after the doorway opens. After that, the connection becomes permanent, allowing full passage between worlds. Today was the second day since the funeral, since the camera had spent the night in the casket. She had until tomorrow night to perform the ritual. As Eliza closed the book, a floorboard creaked overhead. Someone or something was moving around upstairs. She froze, listening. The footsteps crossed her mother's bedroom, then started down the hallway toward the stairs. Eliza shoved the book into her jacket pocket alongside the leather pouch and eased toward the back door. She needed to get to the cemetery, to her mother's grave. But as her hand touched the doorknob, a voice called her name. "Eliza? Is that you down there?" It was Aunt Beth's voice coming from the top of the stairs. Eliza turned, squinting through the darkness to make out her aunt's silhouette. "The power's out," Beth said, descending the stairs. "Storm knocked down lines all over town. I was worried about you." Eliza backed against the door, her hand still on the knob. Something about her aunt's movement seemed wrong. Too fluid, too smooth. "Where have you been all day?" The thing that looked like Beth asked, reaching the bottom of the stairs. In the dim light, her smile appeared too wide for her face. "Running errands," Eliza said carefully. "Just like you." Beth's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "I've been waiting for you, Eliza. We've all been waiting." "We?" Eliza whispered. Beth's smile widened impossibly further, splitting her face almost to the ears. "Your mother was so close to understanding. She knew we needed anchors to cross over completely. What she didn't realize was that death itself is the ultimate anchor. As Beth stepped closer, her movements became jerky, puppet-like. "We've been watching your family for generations, waiting for someone like your mother, someone who could see us, who could build a bridge. And now you, with your final pictures, have completed what she began." Eliza turned the doorknob behind her, pushing the door open a crack. Rain blew in, cold against her back. "You can't run from us, Eliza," Not Beth said, her voice overlapping with others. "We're everywhere now. In every shadow, every reflection, every photograph ever taken of your family. And after tonight, we'll be fully here. What do you want?" Eliza asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. The thing wearing her aunt's face stopped just a few feet away, close enough that Eliza could see the wrongness in its eyes, pupils like horizontal slits. "Everything," it whispered. "Your world. Your lives. Your light, starting with you." It lunged forward, fingers elongating into shadowy claws. Eliza flung herself backward through the door, slamming it shut just as those claw-like fingers scraped against the wood. She ran through the backyard toward her car, the rain soaking her instantly. Behind her, the back door burst open and something that no longer bothered to look entirely like her aunt emerged. A dark shape moving with unnatural speed. Eliza had only one chance now. Get to the cemetery, perform the ritual. Close the door before it was too late. The storm had transformed the world into chaos. Rain lashed sideways, turning streets into shallow rivers. Tree branches whipped through the air, and somewhere in the distance tornado sirens began their eerie wail. It was as if the boundary between worlds wasn't the only thing breaking down. Eliza's car fishtailed as she took a corner too fast, hydroplaning briefly before the tires found grip again. In her rearview mirror, the road behind her remained empty of normal traffic, but dark shapes seemed to flow along the sidewalks, moving too quickly to be human. Following her. The cemetery was on the outskirts of town, a 15-minute drive that now felt like an eternity. Eliza clutched the steering wheel with white knuckles, her mother's book and the leather pouch heavy in her jacket pocket. The wooden box lay on the passenger seat, its carved symbols seeming to pulse with faint light in the storm-darkened car. A fallen tree blocked the main road to the cemetery. Eliza slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop just inches from the massive trunk. She'd have to find another way around, or continue on foot. Lightning split the sky as she stepped out of the car, illuminating the cemetery's wrought iron gates just a quarter-mile ahead. She grabbed the wooden box and started running, each step splashing through ankle-deep water. The wind tore at her clothes, at her hair, as if trying to hold her back. Behind her, something moved through the fallen tree's branches, not climbing over them but passing through them, like smoke seeping through cracks. Eliza reached the cemetery gates and pushed through. In daylight, this place had seemed peaceful, solemn. Now, in the storm's fury, the gravestones rose from the earth like jagged teeth, their shadows writhing in the lightning flashes. Her mother's grave was near the eastern wall, beneath an old oak tree. Eliza stumbled through the muddy paths, searching for landmarks that looked entirely different in the darkness. The rain had soaked her completely, plastering her clothes to her skin, blurring her vision. Another flash of lightning, and Eliza caught sight of the oak tree, its massive branches thrashing in the wind. She ran toward it, feet slipping on the wet grass, nearly falling several times. When she reached the grave, she dropped to her knees in the mud. The earth of her mother's grave was still fresh, not yet grown over with grass. In the dim light between lightning strikes, Eliza could make out the temporary marker with her mother's name. The proper headstone wouldn't be placed for another few weeks. With shaking hands, she pulled out her mother's book, shielding the pages as best she could from the rain. The ritual required a circle of salt mixed with graveyard dirt, the silver needle, and the piece of film that had captured one of the entities. She needed to pierce the film with the needle, place it in the center of the circle, and recite the words her mother had written. Eliza opened the leather pouch, fingers fumbling with the contents, the vial of salt and dirt, the silver needle thin as a hair, and a small square of film, its surface completely black except for a faint, lighter shape in the center, the first photograph that had captured one of the watchers. She began to form the circle, pouring the salt mixture carefully around the grave marker. The wind kept blowing it away, forcing her to use more than she'd planned to make a thicker line. When the circle was complete, she placed the film in its center, then raised the silver needle. Before she could pierce the film, a voice called out behind her, "Eliza, stop. You don't understand what you're doing." She turned to see Dr. Ward hurrying toward her through the storm, her clothes soaked, her face pale with urgency. "Stay back," Eliza shouted over the wind. "You're not Dr. Ward." The woman stopped at the edge of the salt circle. "I am, Eliza. The thing in my office, it took my shape, but I escaped. I've been trying to find you." She pointed at the ritual items. "That won't close the door. It will open it completely. Your mother's research was compromised at the end." The watchers got to her, changed her notes. Eliza hesitated, the needle hovering above the film. Could this be the real Dr. Ward? Had the creatures deceived her mother, altered her final instructions? "How do I know it's really you?" Eliza demanded. Lightning flashed, illuminating Dr. Ward's face. For just an instant, Eliza thought she saw something else beneath the woman's features, something ancient and hungry. Then it was gone, leaving only a concerned middle-aged professor standing in the rain. "Your mother called me the night before she died," Dr. Ward said, her voice softening. She was afraid. She said they were getting stronger, that they could influence her thoughts now. "Whatever she told you, whatever she wrote down, you can't trust it." Dr. Ward took a step closer to the circle. "Give me the needle, Eliza. Let me help you. There's another way to close the door." Something in her tone made Eliza's skin crawl. She remembered her mother's warning. "They will try to stop you. They will use any means necessary, including deception." Eliza tightened her grip on the needle. "My mother said to trust what I know in my heart." "And what does your heart tell you?" Dr. Ward asked, taking another step forward, almost at the edge of the salt circle now. Eliza looked down at the film, at the faint shape captured within its dark surface. Then at the fresh earth of her mother's grave, where she'd stood just 2 days ago to say goodbye. She thought of her mother's final months, her growing fear, her desperate attempts to document what was happening. "It tells me my mother wouldn't have led me into a trap," Eliza said firmly. "She was trying to stop you right until the end?" Dr. Ward's face changed then, the kindly expression melting away like wax. "We offered her everything, knowledge, power, immortality of a kind. She refused. But you, Eliza, you could be so much more than she was." "I'd rather be exactly what she was," Eliza said, and plunged the needle through the center of the film. A sound like glass shattering filled the air, though nothing visible had broken. Dr. Ward, or the thing wearing her face, screamed, a sound too loud, too inhuman to come from a human throat. The shape of her began to waver, like heat rising off hot pavement. Eliza quickly opened her mother's book to the final page. Reading the words written there, her voice growing stronger with each line. "What was open now be sealed. What was joined now be severed. By blood and silver, by earth and salt, I close the passage between worlds." The ground beneath her began to tremble. All around the cemetery, shadows rose from between the gravestones. Tall, thin shapes with too many angles, moving toward her with unnatural speed. But none could cross the salt circle, though they clawed at its edges, leaving trails like black oil in the rain-soaked air. The thing that had been Dr. Ward contorted, its form stretching and twisting. "You have no idea what you're giving up," it hissed, its voice now a chorus of dozens speaking together. "We could have shown you wonders beyond imagining." "I've seen enough," Eliza said, and completed the ritual by pressing her palm to the earth of her mother's grave, feeling the soil cool and damp against her skin. Lightning struck the oak tree with a deafening crack, splitting its trunk down the middle. In that brilliant flash, Eliza saw the shadows for what they truly were. Ancient, hungry things, neither alive nor dead, existing in the spaces between moments. They reached for her with limbs like twisted branches, faces forming and dissolving in their dark masses. Then, as suddenly as it had intensified, the storm began to ease. The shadows shrieked, their forms unraveling like smoke in strong wind. They tried to flee, to return to whatever darkness had spawned them, but it was too late. The doorway was closing. The thing wearing Dr. Ward's face made one last lunge for Eliza, its body elongating impossibly as it stretched across the salt circle. Eliza didn't flinch, didn't move. The creature's fingers, now more like talons, stopped just inches from her face, unable to cross the boundary. "This isn't over," it snarled, its features melting, reforming, melting again. "There are other doors, other ways. We've tasted your world now. We'll find another way in." "Not through my family," Eliza said. "Not anymore." With a sound like air rushing into a vacuum, the shadows vanished. Dr. Ward's form collapsed, empty clothes falling to the muddy ground. All around the cemetery, the darkness receded, leaving only ordinary shadows behind. Eliza remained kneeling by her mother's grave, exhausted but certain the ritual had worked. The doorway was closed. The film in the center of the salt circle had changed, the dark shape within it gone, leaving only a clear square of plastic. As the rain gentled to a soft patter, Eliza gathered her mother's book and the wooden box. The leather pouch she buried in the soft earth of the grave, a small offering to the woman who had fought so hard to protect her, to protect everyone from what lurked beyond the boundary. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, pressing her hand once more to the soil. The storm clouds parted, revealing a sky filled with stars. Eliza stood, her legs shaky but her mind clear for the first time in days. She would return to her mother's house, gather what mattered most and leave this place behind. But she would take the knowledge with her, about doors that should remain closed, about shadows that hunger for light, about the power of a mother's love that reached beyond death itself. As she walked back through the cemetery gates, Eliza felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The camera was just a camera again. The photos would fade with time, but the memory of what she had learned, what her mother had sacrificed to teach her, would remain. Some doors, once opened, leave us forever changed, but it is our choice whether to walk through them or to close them firmly behind us. Eliza chose to close the door, and as she drove away from the cemetery, she didn't look back at the shadows gathering once more beneath the broken oak tree, waiting for someone else to drop something precious into the wrong hands, someone who might not be strong enough to finish what Eliza's mother had started, and what Eliza herself had ended, at least for now.